Say what you will about global warming, although statistically, someone at a cookout already has, and it was exhausting. But if this summer has made you feel less like a person enjoying life and more like a damp CVS receipt slowly dying on the dashboard, congratulations! Your buddy has collectively identified the situation. New England is now stumbling into its second official heat wave of the season, because apparently the weather looked at July and said, interesting, what if we made it historically worse? But somehow still let people call it just summer. This is shaping up to be the hottest weather-related summer on record, which is a phrase that belongs equally in a climate report, a horror trailer, and a Yelp review of Hades that begins, "Parking was easy, but the vibes were unbearable." This past Tuesday's heat was expected to push Boston's seasonal average into new territory. Normally, each year, the city gets about 12 days at or above 90 degrees. They've already hit that number, meaning every additional day is less summer fun and more bonus level in a game designed by a sadist with a weather app. In New England, a heat wave means 3 straight days of 90-degree heat or higher, because apparently even misery needs a qualifying rubric. Boston was forecast to meet that mark this past week, which is not so much a forecast as it is a legally binding threat from the atmosphere. Tuesday's high was expected to reach a sizzling 97 degrees. The city may not break its daily record of 100 degrees set in 1995, but several inland communities across New England were expected to set records of their own. Dew points in the 60s will make it feel like 100 or more, which is the kind of number that should only appear on a thermostat if the thermostat is strapped to a chair under a single swinging tungsten light bulb. Wednesday's high was forecast to be 92 because apparently Tuesday needed a smug little understudy. And Thursday was expecting a high of 91, which technically counts as improvement, in the same way finding a raccoon in your kitchen is an improvement over finding a raccoon family holding a lease. Wednesday and Thursday were forecast to keep the heat wave alive, but the humidity was forecast to finally back off. That means the air may feel slightly less like you're breathing through a warm sponge and more like you're being gently exhaled on by a toaster. We are not talking crisp fall weather here. We are talking the difference between person standing too close to an oven and human casserole with the Aries. Heat risk ranged from major to extreme, so heat advisories were in place. And that matters because this kind of heat can be dangerous, especially for people without reliable cooling, outdoor workers, older adults, young children, and anyone whose apartment becomes a brick pizza oven by 2 p.m. This is not the time to prove that you are tougher than the sun. You are not. The sun's been doing this for 4.6 billion years, and unlike you, has never once needed to sit down after carrying groceries upstairs. Air quality alerts were also expected as high heat and bright sunshine drive up ground level ozone, which can make the air unhealthy for sensitive groups, including older adults, active children, and people with asthma, heart disease, and other respiratory conditions. In other words, if the air feels like it has been lightly poisoned by a photocopier and a poorly managed Staples, please take that seriously. The atmosphere is not supposed to feel like office equipment developing a grudge. And just in case New England was starting to feel special, don't worry, it's not. This heat wave is not politely staying regional, like a lobster roll festival or an aggressively opinionated town meeting. More than 100 million Americans are under heat alerts across the country, stretching from Southern California to the Northern Plains to the Upper Midwest. That is less of a weather map and more of a national group text from the sun saying, "You up?" Daily record highs were expected to fall in places like Rapid City, Fargo, and Grand Forks, while back east, Syracuse, New York was also staring down a potential record of its own, because apparently the entire country has entered the preheat oven stage of summer, and no one can find the knob because we've built it into the economy. And on Monday, the records were not merely threatened, they were dragged outside and introduced to a wood chipper. Bismarck, North Dakota hit 105 degrees, which is a temperature normally reserved for slow-cooking brisket, Satan's guest bathroom, or regretting asphalt. International Falls, Minnesota, famously a place whose entire brand is bring a coat or perish, reached 97. Rapid City, South Dakota, and Dickens, North Dakota tied records at 102 and 103 respectively. At that point, the thermometer is no longer measuring weather. It is filing a hostile workplace complaint. And because the atmosphere apparently saw dangerous heat and thought, could use a garnish of respiratory distress, shifting winds are expected to carry smoke from more than 800 Canadian wildfires into the upper Northeast and Midwest on Wednesday, creating hazardous air quality for millions. So to recap, it's too hot, the air may be unhealthy, and the sky is importing smoke like it's a cursed seasonal latte. This is the kind of weather update that makes you want to hydrate, stay indoors, check on your neighbors, and perhaps file a class action lawsuit against the concept of summer. And here's the part where science walks in, clears its throat, and says, actually, this is not a mystery. It is embarrassingly straightforward. When humans burn fossil fuels, we pump heat-trapping greenhouse gases into the atmosphere where they pile up like a planetary weighted blanket. Except instead of helping Earth sleep, it warms the land, heats the oceans, and makes summer feel less like a season and more like a subscription service to Hades that renews automatically and has no visible cancel button. Global warming, whether you personally acknowledge it or prefer treating it like a suspicious noise in the basement that will definitely stop if you turn the TV up, is a real problem. But the good news, grim little phrase though that is that there are things we can actually do to help. Starting at home, where energy is one of the biggest contributors to an individual's carbon footprint. That means figuring out where the energy is going, which is basically a household audit, except the culprit is usually not a person. It is your refrigerator, your drafty windows, and the charger you have left plugged in since the Obama administration, bravely accomplishing nothing. That's because a phone charger that is not actively charging still draws a tiny amount of power. One charger may only waste pennies a year, but across a house full of devices, and then across thousands of homes, suddenly those pennies become a little national bonfire of wasted electricity, which is both stupid and, frankly, exactly the kind of thing humanity would do while calling itself advanced. While switching to renewable energy sources is out of most people's budget, upgrading to more efficient appliances when old ones finally stop wheezing like Victorian orphans, improving insulation, adding weather stripping where we can, and cutting unnecessary electricity use, which mercifully is something almost everyone can do, all help reduce our carbon footprint. Another possibility is trees. And yes, that may sound like the environmental equivalent of the landlord saying, have you tried opening a window? But trees genuinely matter. They store carbon, cool neighborhoods, support ecosystems, and generally do a better job contributing to society than many things currently receiving venture capital. So plant trees in your yard or community if you can. Donate to reputable reforestation groups. Support local green initiatives and advocate for protecting existing forests. Because while planting new trees is great, chopping down old forests and then congratulating ourselves for planting saplings is like burning down a library and replacing it with a pamphlet rack, then asking for applause because the pamphlets are laminated. Then there's transportation, the second largest source of household emissions. And the reason many of us spend a portion of our lives sitting motionless on a road, silently bargaining with a traffic light as if it were a tiny red god. For short trips, walking or biking instead of driving can help. Carpooling can help too, assuming you like your colleagues enough to share both a commute and the haunting intimacy of morning small talk. And no, one day a week of alternate transportation will not single-handedly save the planet, but multiplied across people, weeks, and communities, it adds up. And collective addition is the whole point. Climate action is not one heroic movie moment where someone flips a giant switch labeled Planet Fix. It's millions of small, deeply unglamorous choices, which frankly is annoying, because if we're going to save the world, it would be nice if at least it came with explosions, a swelling orchestra, and fewer errands.